All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third day here at the, I'm like, wait, what day is today? Welcome to our third day at the Pasifika Scholars Summer Institute 2021. We're excited for our two panels today and to learn from all the folks that are here. This morning, we're going to start out with our first session, which we'll be hearing from current graduate students about their experiences here at the University of Utah Pacific Islanders, moving through different programs, as well as just having you exposed to peer experiences instead of just hearing it from Kehau and I. So today, our theme for today is the Seeking Knowledge Guarantees Wisdom, which is a Marshallese proverb. And we want all of you to just be intentional about today and think about how understanding the world around you and getting more knowledge through formal education is only one path to seeking wisdom. But how do you bring that to your community and understand the world around you? We talked a little bit yesterday about perspectives and multiple perspectives and stories that are not told, and also just looking at everyday objects like tangatu that we discussed, and how important it is to recognize that even within our own families, there are stories that we kind of marginalize or we don't really take the time to listen to. So thank you all for joining us this morning. I think we'll just start off with our panel, and I will have Kehau start that off.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Like Moana was saying, today we're just giving you an opportunity to hear from our current graduate students. We try to get a diversity of where they're at in their programs and different interests, graduate interests. And they've all agreed to kind of give you their emails in case you want to keep in touch with them or if you have any questions following this panel. I'll start us off by introducing the first two panelists. The first one is, and this will just be like their brief formal introduction, but I'm sure that they're going to add more to their intros. The first panelist is Kehau Kehalani Folau. She's the third daughter to Olono and Melsina Folau. Her parents migrated to the US in the 80s from Fasi, Tonga, and Pingalap, Pohnpei, and settled on the west side of Salt Lake City in Rose Park. She is currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Utah Valley University. She's also a PhD student in ECS, Education, Culture, and Society, which is my department, and she is my mentee, her advisor. Her research interests include Indigenous approaches to relationality, particularly the Tongan practices of Fatonia and Tauhiva within higher education. She's also just someone that has a lot of knowledge about the U in general. She's worked on campus before and worked in the graduate division. So she is an integral person if you're interested in pursuing graduate education in general and especially at the U. And she's also been involved with TRIO as well. And all of our panelists have like a lot of on the ground experience. So please feel free to get in touch with them besides the formal panel that we're doing. The next student is also an ECS and is an MA student. Kaimana Kahale is a graduate student in the same department as Kehau, and his research interests are basically, kind of disaggregating data, the Asian American rubric. He graduated from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, received a Bachelor's of Arts in History, and played collegiate level football. Originally, and still, he's currently coming and zooming in from Molokai. So the time difference, it's very early for him, but he's been getting up every morning to be with us. He wishes to use his Ike attained from higher education in order to tackle issues of education back home. While in Hawaii, Kaimana works as a substitute teacher, a summer school instructor, and coaches various middle high school sports. His current research centers around disaggregation, like I had mentioned, and problematizes the API rubric through our culture, our history, and identities of Pacific Islanders within college. He's also interested in working at the community level, ensuring that Native Hawaiians students have ample opportunities within higher education or other career pathways that they so choose. In his spare time, Kaimana enjoys going to the beach, spending time with ohana and friends, playing guitar, and anything that has to do with things that are nerdy, he said, video games, comics, binge watching shows. And I think because Kaimana mentioned that his interest in music, then he should have to play for us on Friday. You're being voluntold. But let's welcome Kehau and Kaimana, and then I'm going to shift it over to Moana, who's going to introduce the next two panelists.
Okay, yeah, I also support that, Kehau. Our next panelist is Luti. Luti was born in 1995 to Shone Nonu and Latai Wolfgang Nonu in Kehau, Hawaii. While young, however, his family moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, where Luti has lived the majority of his life. He graduated from Highland High School in 2013. Following an LDS mission in Oaxaca, Mexico, he graduated from BYU with his bachelor's in science degree and in a science degree majoring in biology. During that time, he married Kehau Kehalani Nonu, and they currently have one daughter. Following his graduation from BYU in April 2020, Luti began medical school at the University of Utah School of Medicine in August of 2020. And then our final, the last but not the least, is Latu Kinikini, who was born in the islands of Tonga to Taniela Hopoate and Eunice Pikula. As a young girl, her family migrated to New Zealand, where she was raised with her sister and 4 brothers. As a first-generation student, Latu has pursued several degrees. In 2004, she received her bachelor's degree at the University of Utah in speech communication. And in 2013, Latu earned her master's degree in education, leadership, and policy. Currently, she's a PhD student in the ELP program at the University of Utah. With 16 years of working full-time in higher ed, Latu is an advocate for Indigenous knowledge, culture, and education. And currently, Latu is a program director for the Opportunity Scholars, which many of you may be interested in. It's a first-generation undergraduate program in the Echo School of Business. She really enjoys teaching and supporting her students and their college experiences. But her most important role in life is a mom and wife. Latu has been married for 28 years to Tevita Kinikini, and together they have raised 4 children, Eileen and Mylan, Nisi, and Noah. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We're so glad that you bring a diversity of experiences to this panel, and that we're able to hear a little bit about your own educational journeys. And I think that's where we wanted to start out, right, Kehau? If each one of you could just take a minute or so and mostly describe your own educational journey, whatever things you want to highlight, so that those who are in attendance can kind of see that it's not always as peachy or as simple or straight line. That's what we've been telling our scholars throughout the program. So if we could start with anyone who wants popcorn out, we'll start.
I think ladies first. So.
I think since you just volunteered us, she should go first.
That's fine. I can go first. Yeah, I can explain just a little bit of my journey. Luckily, I was born to I was a first generation Tongan American. Both my parents had both immigrated to the United States, but luckily enough, I was raised, they both got scholarships to go to BYUH, and I was lucky to have 2 parents who were immigrants, but who were blessed enough to have gone to college education. And so from a young age, I kind of had that expectancy already to go to college and to continue that tradition of going to college and continue and furthering my education. I remember when I was young, and I've told this story quite a bit about kind of where that desire to be a doctor started from, but I was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, and my dad had quit accounting. He got an accounting degree, but realized he didn't like the office life. And he was doing his own construction company and doing yate, doing some SEMA and everything. And he asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I told him, I want to be just like you, Dad, and I want to do construction. And he kind of got mad and laughed and kind of got mad at me. And he said, I don't want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to go and I want you to use your brain and work smarter, not harder. And so from a young age, he told me that I could do whatever I wanted. And that included either being a doctor or a pilot or becoming a lawyer or whatever it was that I desired. And, at that age, I didn't know exactly, but I thought I was pretty good at math and science. So from a really young age, I told myself I wanted to be a doctor one day and kind of just pursue that dream from when I was a young kid. So luckily for me, I think I did have a really good base and a really good background in regards to my family. My family always put an emphasis on education for us, and they always helped us with reading at home. A lot of times it was like scripture or like religious reading, but I think a lot of that helped us in school when we were in school and everything in regards to education. But when I got to BYU, I realized that going to becoming a doctor was going to be kind of hard because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. Like there's a lot of things that you have to do, and I didn't know what those were. A lot of the counselors there were kind of hard to deal with in regards to getting to become a doctor and kind of guiding me to that point. A lot of the professors were kind of hard to work with. So it was kind of weird. It was kind of weird as a Polynesian islander down at BYU to really know how to navigate to become a doctor. But I am grateful because down there, I still found a pretty good community in regards to finding good Polynesians who could help me. I played rugby down at BYU, and I had a lot of good teammates who luckily could guide me as well and tell me which classes to take. And there's a lot more details, but I guess I just want to briefly just say it wasn't peachy, like Moana was saying. It wasn't peachy and super easy to get here. There are a lot of things, a lot of challenges that being Polynesian it comes with being Polynesian, because you don't typically see a lot of Polynesians in grad school or whatever. But for you attendees that are coming, I will say that it's worth it. I'm not even there yet, but it is worth it. And there's a lot of help and a lot of people around us. That the Polynesian world is a very strong community, and I'm very grateful to be Polynesian because there's people around us who are always there to help us and help you, and that includes myself. So for you attendees, if you ever wanted to go down the medicine route, please know that I'm here to help you and with whatever endeavors or whatever challenges that you may face in your career. I saw one of my little cousins, and she's going to be in high school, so like Salvia, or for a lot of you that might be an undergrad, this is an opportunity to reach out to any of these panelists, including myself, to face the unique challenges. I don't know if I should spend the whole time going into every small detail and challenge that I face, but it was hard, but it is worth it. And I think it is a worthwhile thing for all of you to look forward to as you go throughout your education.
Thanks, Luti. Kaimana, do you mind going next?
Hi, and good morning, everyone. I think for some of the scholars, this is kind of a reiteration of our first day where I described my own life. But yeah, I mean, my career path, my education has not been very linear at all. There's been a lot of ups and downs and twists and turns. And I think a lot of it for me was just either finding good people to surround myself with, or just honestly some sheer luck that happened along the way too. As you folks kind of know already, I grew up here on the island of Molokai, but I've bounced around a bit. I was actually born in the mainland and spent some time on the island of Oahu. So I was kind of incubated in a lot of different environments, urban environment in the mainland, kind of suburban environment on Oahu and Kaneohe, and then very, very rural for most of my life here in Molokai. And I think me trying to balance all of these different kind of lifestyles made it on one hand kind of challenging to find a space to be a part of, because thinking back in my undergraduate and going up to Portland, the major culture shock of finally being in an area where there's more than 2-story buildings, or you see stoplights, right, was kind of like, whoa. But at the same time, being in these different environments has allowed me to kind of expand my horizons. I went to high school at Molokai High School, our only high school on island. So it wasn't like there was a lot of options in terms of education here. But I think that close-knit environment was something that really propelled me in my education, right? Seeking those who I could forge relationships and connections with, being able to know those around me, I think was a very crucial thing in me kind of seeking and finding my educational niche wherever I was. And I think that was part of the reason why I decided to go to a small liberal arts college for my undergrad in Portland at Lewis and Clark. Being able to surround myself with a large, body of Pacific Islanders at that university was, on one hand, a major perk. But also, just the small campus environment and being able to have these, relationships with professors and staff and people around me. And then something that I found here at the University of Utah, right, is despite, being miles away via Zoom for my first year, still having that kind of environment and being able to, link up with people like Dr. Vaughn and Moana and all of you folks is something that kind of, was a major reason or a major calling to why I wanted to continue my education in this route. So yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail to take away from the time that other people have, but that's one thing. I know there's this huge stereotype, which is a lot of times quite negative, about Pacific Islanders only being able to attain higher education through athletics. But for me, that was actually the case. I was, I played sports throughout high school. I played football, I played volleyball, I played basketball. I pretty much did everything on the board. And it was kind of apparent that that was going to be one of my own, at least during that time, one of my only options to go to college was to play sports. I was fortunate to be able to play collegiate level football at Lewis and Clark College. But, I even myself and my own family were kind of indoctrinated in this idea that, well, we can't really support you financially because of our own circumstances. So you need to find other avenues. And it was our understanding that sports was one of the only ways to do that. So while I think there, are some negative aspects to being put in that mindset, I also have to attribute a lot of my success in my journey through athletics, right? Like Luti mentioned, with him in rugby, being surrounded by, people who could recommend classes to me and friends and just having a community right from the onset from being on campus was huge for my own educational journey. So yeah, and I guess one more thing to end it off is I also have parents who, made education a top priority in our household. They both have had their, or at least one of them had their masters, the other had their bachelor, so they both went to college. And I think, being able to be in a household that made education at the highest priority was something that kind of like propelled me in my own journey. Other than, getting lickings for not getting good grades, like, it was definitely something that helped me grow my own kind of like educational identity know that, this is a route that I want to pursue. But yeah, I know some of you folks are going to sort of like the graduate level in your own educational journey or whatever steps that you folks are in. And I'm more than happy to assist you folks in any capacity that I can. Again, I'll share my contact information at the end, but really happy to be here and sharing space with all of you folks and learning and growing as we go.
Thanks, Mana. Kehau, do you mind going next?
Yeah, I could share a little. First, I just want to say I extend my help to y'all too. I think I got where I am now because of all the mentors I've had throughout my life. I'm lucky that I have two older sisters who also went to the U. And so it was kind of just a natural progression for me, or more like an expectation. My parents also met at BYUH, but they didn't finish. And so anyways, they finished a lot later. So they didn't really have the knowledge to guide me and my sisters to the U, even though we ended up being here. I'm lucky, yeah, my two older sisters did their undergrad and their master's at the U, and so it was just kind of an expectation. I actually got lucky. I didn't get accepted to the U, but I was a part of the 5% that barely made the cut, or that barely didn't make the cut. And so I was sponsored by the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs that's at the U. And because I was sponsored, I had to do the Diversity Scholars program. And because of that, I had to take an Intro to Ethnic Studies course. And from there, I found faculty mentors who mentored me throughout, not just my first year, but throughout my whole thing. I still talk to those faculty members. And then they gave me the options to be like, oh, these are some master's programs that I think you would excel in. And I was just like, no. And so I took a year off after my undergrad and was just like, I want to be a teacher. So I went and taught third grade in Sacramento, California, and realized I'm not a teacher. I'm like, I got burnt out really quick. A lot of like my principal and other teachers said that it was because I cared too much. And that could be the case, but yeah, some of the stories just broke my heart. So I came back to Utah and worked. And honestly, I didn't want to do a PhD program. I was just like, oh, I already have a job. I'm okay. I'm like, why? And then I think it was just a sign because one of my best friends was just like, no, let's do it. And I was just like, but where would I apply to? And then Kehau came to Utah and I was just like, wait, that's my name. I was just like, there's no one else I know. And then also she was the only Pacific Islander faculty 10-year track in education. And so I was just like, if I go do my PhD program, it has to be in education. Well, in the continental US, there's 3 others in Hawaii, and then a lot throughout the Pacific, but I want to stay home. And so it was just a natural, I think people have guided me to where I should be. And so, yeah, if it wasn't for Dr. Vaughn, I'd still be working at the U and not be a student, but I've enjoyed it most of the time, or yeah, but that's just a little about my story.
Thanks, Kehau. Yeah, I can't take all the credit for you not working here anymore. But Latu, do you mind sharing?
Sure. First of all, I'm really grateful for the theme, which is seeking knowledge and wisdom, because I feel like in my own experience, that has been my life experience. Is that every little thing that has happened to me so far has been just part of my gaining of knowledge and wisdom, and even those experiences that have been both good and bad. And so I think looking back at my education, I think I always knew that education was important in my life. It just didn't resonate to me until much later in my college experience as to why it was important. I think growing up, I heard it all the time. from my family, especially. My father and my grandpa especially really honed into it and told me that I need to get an education, and that education is going to help me and my family in the long term. And so as a young kid, I heard that and I knew that it was important. I just didn't know why. And so my parents, like some of our panelists here, didn't finish high school. They both dropped out. They had attended Liahona High School in Tonga. Of course, when they met, that changed everything. And so they got married and they had me. And so they then moved to New Zealand, and that's where I was raised. And so there were certain experiences, I think, especially one that stood out to me was in high school in my senior year when we had our senior awards night. I was the student head girl there, and I just remember that my parents and my grandparents were there to support me. And then after that awards night, you know, my grandfather handed me a gift. And I thought, you know, like those who graduate, I mean, you've seen this past week how graduation, you have all these leis layered on you and you get money. I didn't get any of that. He just gave me this huge white textbook. And in the textbook, when I looked at it, it was a book on human anatomy. And science, of course, was not my strongest topic or my subject. I knew at that particular point as a senior that I wanted to go into art. And so I thought, why did my grandpa give me a book on human anatomy? But when I opened the book, again, hoping that there would be money that he would have inserted in there, there was none of that. It was just his handwriting where he wrote, Dr. Latu, you can be whatever you want to be. And when I read that, as a young person, I thought, I don't know if I'll ever get to that point, you know, but it resonated to me now, just looking back and thinking, I'm right now working on my doctorate, you know, on my PhD. And my grandpa saw something in me that I really didn't realize until this particular point. And then when I started in college, my freshman year was at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. That was probably my hardest year as a freshman student. One, because I am a first generation and I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of following along with everyone else, in a way, just copying what every freshman was doing. And I remember in particular when I had to pay for tuition, being directed to go to, you know, pay my tuition. I didn't know how I was going to pay for that. And I remember having to call my dad because when he dropped me off that day for registration, he said, just call me once you know how much you need to pay for tuition and I'll come, you know, with the money. And I thought, okay. So I, you know, registered into my classes, then I called him up and then he came over and sorry, these are always inspiring moments for me when I think about the people who made an impact. But he came and he stood in line with me. And I thought, you know, as a young person, it was kind of awkward to have my dad stand in line with me. But he had the cash and he paid for it. And I didn't know until later on when my mom said that was our savings because he lost his job. But that has always moved me and has always kept me grateful, because then I realized the sacrifice that my parents made. And so, you know, those two experiences really resonated to me as far as why education is important. And so looking back, you know, and seeing what I know now, I really would have, you know, I always sometimes think I could have done better in some of my classes, but I now see the value of education and I see the sacrifices of my parents and my grandparents because they saw in me something that I didn't realize until now. So I truly am grateful that I am where I am right now because of family, friends, and mentors.
Thank you, Latu. Are we going to have all the attendees come up to the panel? We'll shift right now. We're going to have all the attendees come in as panelists, so that way you have a chance to see them and they can ask questions, and we'll continue to kind of moderate if need be. Okay, so as we have our attendees think of, of some questions, some specific questions to ask all of you, or maybe specific folks, I kind of wanted to hone in on some of the things that you all had mentioned, and wondering if any one of you want to speak to this more, which is, I know Latu, for example, you're a doctoral student in the education and leadership program, and you had shared before that your path wasn't so linear in terms of you being a parent and attending school. So I was wondering if you could speak to that and talk a little bit more about why you chose education, leadership, and policy. So.
Sure. I think I think my experience has been more of a major exploration. For example, when I had mentioned earlier, I think out of high school, I thought art is what I wanted to major in, and it was just because I loved all of my art classes in high school, and I saw that's what I had in mind, and I started taking art classes at Salt Lake Community College as I was working on my 2-year degree. And I realized as I was taking that, at the same time, I was raising a little family. And I thought that I could, I needed support. And my husband was totally supportive. When I told him right up front, before we got married, that I wanted to continue my education, he totally was on it and said, yeah, let's get you through school. And so he would work and I would be home raising our children, and then we would exchange. So when he got off work, then I would take classes in the late afternoons. So that's what we did as I worked on my 2-year degree. And then I transferred over to the University of Utah and found out that they had this program in art that was an emphasis in graphic design. And I found out from that department that you actually had to create a portfolio of some of your work in different mediums, like in photography, in painting, in sculpture. And so I worked on that for a year, and it wasn't easy because I remember there were times when I would come back home and I had a project or homework to do, and I had my children. And there are times when I would have to wait till they fell asleep, at night, and then I would stay up in the wee hours of the night trying to finish my homework. And so, that itself took a toll on just, having to try and do all of that. But it worked out. I think it was just a lot of hard work, but I was willing to put the hard, work into it. Um, so when I created my portfolio, I submitted to the art department, and then I heard back from them because I think there was about 200 applicants and they only take 40 students for their cohort every year. And I got word back from them that I got accepted into the graphic design program, but that I would have to dedicate time, Monday to Fridays during the day to work with my cohort. And I knew I couldn't do it because I had to be home with my kids. And so there were certain classes in my general education class requirements that I really enjoyed at the same time, and those were communication courses. So I looked into that major, and their classes were offered at a time that was convenient for me. And so I switched my major from art to speech communication. And they had a program that was more for law students because it was an emphasis on argumentation and decision making. And I loved it because I loved the debating and the speech portion of it. So I went ahead and pursued that major, and that's what I earned as my bachelor degree. And then from there, I was mentored really by colleagues and some of my friends to continue my education. And that's when I started to look into educational leadership and policy. By that time, I had already worked at the institutional level in advising students. So all of those experiences kind of just played out. And here I am. I don't think I ever planned on wanting to go into higher education, but here I am, and I realize that this is really important work to do. And I actually love working with students and sharing my experiences with them.
Thanks, Latu. Do anyone else, would you all like to speak to your path not being so linear? I know, Kehau, for example, you've taken some time off and worked, and then decided on programs. I don't know if you want to share something like that, or to the other panelists as well, if you want to share like basically what you're doing in terms of your research. I know, Luti, you were interested in COVID and the Pacific Islander community. I don't know if you want to share about that research, or Kehau and Kaimana and Latu, your particular research projects that you're pursuing in your graduate programs. I'm going to ask Luti to start just because you're the med student.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So I'm involved in a few different research projects right now. A lot of them are actually orthopedic surgery research projects. I've actually gone into the OR and seen some really cool surgeries in regards to orthopedics during the summer. But I did get to be part of a project, and we're still trying to get it going right now in regards to how COVID affected our Polynesian community. And I thought it was really interesting. We got to interview a few people, and we're hoping to interview a lot more and just get the story about COVID and our Polynesian people. And for those of you who may or may not know, but COVID affected our Polynesian people more per capita, more than any other race or ethnicity in the state of Utah. There were more deaths and then more hospitalizations and more cases per capita in our Polynesian community than in any other ethnicity. And so we were involved in a project this past little year, in trying to just capture the image and capture that picture of, and really write down those stories of our families, of those members who passed away, of the lives that we faced as Polynesians in COVID. And it's been kind of a really cool and really impactful research project, and seeing how it's affected us. Most of our families come from multi-generational homes, or like a lot of us, live with grandparents, or a lot of us parents are living with their grandkids or something like that. And Polynesians generally have big family gatherings. And so that, on top of like economic factors as well, on top of socio-cultural factors as well, there's a lot of things that affected our Polynesian community, especially with COVID. I think we could expand that and say a lot of minorities were affected more with COVID than the majority of the population. But I guess I just wanted to share that. It was a really cool project, and just also just send my love out to you guys and your families. We're kind of at the latter part of COVID, and it's really nice to just kind of see that our people can start to live some of the traditions and the culture that we were used to before. But our time during COVID was a really hard, impactful time for a lot of us, and a lot of us have lost some kind of family members, and so I just want to send my love out and just hope for the best for everyone as we are trying to recover and hopefully be done with COVID and all the impacts that it had. That was one of the projects that we were involved with, but thank you for letting me share that. I don't know if you wanted to hear anything else, Kehau, but
that was perfect. Thank you, Luti. I just wanted our scholars to hear about maybe some of the types of research that you can do in the various programs that we're in. And Luti and I think that was the first time we met virtually, was the conversation around COVID. So thank you, Luti, for sharing that and the various other opportunities you have. Latu, Kehau, or Kaimana, did you want to add the type of research that you're interested in pursuing and you're pursuing in your graduate program?
Yeah, I can kind of share a little bit about what I am working on. So I am doing a pilot study this summer, meaning that I will do some qualitative work interviewing Tongan students. So my interest is looking at understanding and explaining the Tongan American college experience at a four-year institution or research institution. So the pilot study will give me an idea on how to do that research on a small scale this summer. And then hopefully when I take my qualifying exam to do dissertation work, I'll be able to do that with more students or a larger number of Tongan students attending the University of Utah. And so that research is based on my own experience because I wanted to really understand what the experience is now for Tongan students versus my own experience from years ago. So.
Thank you, Latu. Kehau, Kaimana.
Right. Oh, can I add something real quick, Cal? For the scholars, just connecting from yesterday, with the research that everyone is describing, I think it's interesting too, is that if you think about Yosepa and we talked about Latu, that they may be your interest now as an undergraduate, but these become or develop into these research projects that Latu, Kehau, Luti, and Mana are talking about. And so like, I think of it as like it's beginning stages, like let me just think about these things when you're an undergraduate. So like looking at all of them and they're saying these big words like in the graduate level, I think just thinking about like, okay, we're introducing you to this because right now as an undergraduate or someone who is thinking about graduate school in the future, these are some of the thoughts or like the beginnings of a huge research project that you would delve in really deep into as a graduate level student.
Mana, Kehau.
I can go. Yeah, so I'm kind of like in the beginning stages, or I guess I have a lot of different projects that I would like to do. And I think that's kind of the issue with me and projects is I have a lot of like ideas and things that I would love to research and learn more about, but I oftentimes find myself jumping from one to the other. But I guess the one that I've been kind of focusing in my first year of the master's program was this kind of issue that we see with the Asian American Pacific Islander or AAPI framing that we see within higher education. We see it with statistical data and census records and a whole bunch of other things, and kind of disaggregating or kind of at least critiquing this framework, because what I argue is I don't, and this is there's been literature on this and a lot of scholars have talked about this. Dr. Vaughn has, written about this as well. But, in terms of colonialism, just, culturally, relationship to kind of America and a whole bunch of other issues. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are not similar at all. Or there's a lot of differences, I guess. There are similarities, but there's a lot of differences between the two groups. And when you bunch them together, Pacific Islander voices are often either distorted or completely invisible at times. And so some of the research that I was doing was kind of focusing on this framework in higher ed, but specifically with Pac-12 universities. So looking at, schools like the University of Oregon or UCLA or our own school, and seeing how various universities are engaging with this framework. But that's just kind of like one thing that I was doing. I also had some interest in looking at this phenomena in Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian epistemologies known as Omakua. I was doing that for another class, and I was really kind of enjoying the research that I was doing on it. If you folks don't know what Omakua are, it's hard to just have a clear-cut definition, but they essentially are ancestral figures that can manifest in various forms, be them inanimate or animate. So, for example, and they're often very closely related to kinship and familial ties. So my family's Omakua is the pueo or the owl. Other families have different ones. They could be, you know, the honu or turtle. It could be like a rock. It could be like a specific landscape. So yeah, that kind of just shows that like I'm in this state where I have a lot of hands or interests in things, and I'm still trying to figure it out, which you know, goes back to this idea that your educational experience, or at least with me and some of the panelists, is not all that linear. You're still in this process of discovery and trying to figure out what you want to do, even at this point where we are in graduate school or in our PhD routes or in being doctors, right? Like we're still trying to figure these types of things out.
Thanks, Mana. Kehau?
Yeah, I'm with Mama. I don't really know. I feel like I have a lot of interests and I'm trying to narrow down what I want to focus on. I think that was my problem in my undergrad too. I changed my major 5 times. And the only reason I ended in ethnic studies is because by the time I wanted to change, I already had all the credits to be an ethnic studies graduate. And so I was just like, oh, that worked out. I think that speaks to how ethnic studies kept me in school. Like those were the classes that kept me going, and it sustained me. I'm really interested in aligning what I think I know and what I do. And so I think people from the Moana are the best examples of how to do this. Fatonia, which is responsibility, and Tongan, like by simply fulfilling our responsibilities, I think show us how to navigate the space that we're in. And so I also work full-time as a PhD student. And I think I only do that just to make sure that I'm also doing what I'm learning, to see how it transfers into practice. Because as an undergrad, I loved theory. If anyone's paying attention to the news right now, there's a lot of criticism on critical race theory. And it sucks too, because I'm critical of it too, but like not in the same ways that it is discussed in the media. I critique it because it, like, race maintains the status quo, and yet they're talking about it as if it's a bad thing. I think it's useful in a lot of ways. And so I'm really interested in a Tongan theory called Tava theory that looks at time and space. And it kind of, what I love about it is it decenters everything to show that everything's connected. And so in that way, everything's significant, but in a way that we're all connected and not one thing should be the focus. And so that's why it's hard. Like, what do I want to focus on while I'm using this theory that really decenters everything? But I do know that I want to study, the experiences of our people within these spaces, because I think it's a story worth telling that hasn't been told within higher ed. And so how do I bring those stories here is really, again, how do I approach those stories in a culturally like responsive way or like appropriate way is something I'm still learning. And yet I'm old, I won't say my name or I won't say my age, but like Sandra, it's so good to see you, because I think you were still in youth when I went to the YSA ward when your dad was in the bishopric. Like, that's how old I am. I can no longer be a YSA. Like, that's how old I am. But yeah, I think it's navigating what you want to do, and like really loving it. I was an architect major in my undergrad for 3 years until I got an internship and realized, like, oh crap, I don't want to do this. Like, why would I want to do this? And then I changed it to business. And then I was just like, let's follow someone who actually does this to see if this is what I want to do. And watching their experience, I was just like, why would I want to do this? I don't want to do this. I'm currently the diversity director at UVU. And I wanted to have my boss's job, but watching her, I'm like, I don't want to do this. So I'm still figuring it out. But I do know that I love learning. And so this is the best place that I've been in so far.
Thank you for that. Moana do any of the scholars have questions specific to the panel? If not, I have tons of questions I can ask them, and most of them are my students. So
I think if I could just ask a quick question, and this might be like kind of a simple answer, so I might not take up too much time, but I think one of the biggest things, at least being a first-time student and going into college, and then just like I just wanted to ask how everybody balances the familial responsibilities that we have, especially within our culture, and how we can learn to sacrifice certain things that I think, at least for me and my family, that I feel I should be taking on, or things I should be doing. But in order to gain an education, or in order to, progress within education, I'll have to kind of sacrifice. And that means a lot of different things like time, or, financial responsibility that sometimes I feel I have, the idea of, oh, I could be working instead of pursuing this degree full time, and that would better help my family at this time. And I think a lot of us struggle through it. A lot of my friends I know are struggling through it currently, and that's actually why they don't pursue further education, is because, they have those familiar responsibilities and those ties, connections to their families that really, I wouldn't say prevent them, but that's taking up their time now. And so I'm trying to balance that as best I can. But how have you been able to do that as you pursue education? Yeah, just any advice would be great. Thank you.
And then Sandra, you're the oldest daughter, right?
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Okay. Yeah. Latu is also the fahu for her family. And so I think she has great perspective on how this is. I'm the youngest girl, not only within my immediate family, but within my first cousins here in Utah. So I got super babied. And then like in front of everyone else, I got bullied or bossed around. And so it's just like, where's the balance? There's no balance. And there is no balance. I want to say that's a crappy answer. And maybe it's just for me, like that's my answer, but I've actually it helps me like to realize that I can't balance this, like both life, work, and school. But I do find a rhythm. And I think the rhythms has helped me. Like when I'm doing great at school, I'm not doing great at work. I found that out the hard way this past semester. I have always worked though. In my undergrad, I had 3 jobs. In my master's, even though it was fully paid, I had 3 jobs. And then as a PhD student, I worked full time. And so I think the financial responsibility is pushed even harder when your family does know that you make money. That's just the hard truth. Like, but it's okay. We accept it when they need it. You want to give it to them because they've given you so much. But I think the faster you realize that like, I can't really balance everything, but like when you do spend your time on certain like things, like whether it's school, work, family, then you're dedicated in that time, in that moment, you're taking it. I think when I was trying to balance, like when I was spending time with family, I was constantly checking my emails and was just like, oh, okay, I could do this. I'm still learning this though. Like now when I spend time with family, I put all that stuff away. Like, I'm like, no, this is my time with them. And then also like, I work at 8 to 5. When I'm working, I make sure that I'm productive. And so it's a lot of time management because, oh, I think you'd like Taba theory because it just shows you how precious your time, like your time is in the spaces that you occupy. And so time management is huge. And for those who aren't good at time management, like me, I think you have to be even more structured with your time, which kind of sucks, but it has helped me navigate, like, I want to spend this much time with work and this much time with family. And then as long as my family knows that, like things come up, things will always come up. I feel like even with COVID, before COVID, Like when there was a Tongan funeral, there were three. Like there were three funerals. Like I don't know what's up with that phenomenon. Luti, if you want to look into that, like I don't know why our people want to go together, but it's always that way. Like one person dies and then you have two others like within the week or within 2 weeks. And it's just like, okay, do I have a job that supports me during this time that I need to take off? And if I don't, then is that job worth keeping? And thankfully, like even with my current boss right now, she's Tongan, she gets it. And I don't think like other bosses haven't, and they're like, sorry, Kehau, you can't take that time off. And I'm just like it just makes you reflect more of like, is this the position that I want to stay in for a long time if they don't support these goals of mine, or even just the lifestyle that I come with? And if it's no, then I think you need to have that hard conversation of like, is it worth it? But there are a lot of spaces like Dr. Vaughn, she's my faculty advisor, and she's constantly telling me to rest and to take time for myself and to spend time with family. Not all advisors will do that for you. Like there's a lot of advisors who will use you to do their work, and then like not even care that you're not taking care of yourself physically or mentally or emotionally. And so I think it's finding those people and then also managing your time. But again, I think Latu would be the expert in like fahu status, because I look at my oldest sister and I'm like, thank goodness I'm not the fahu. I'm like, I'm gonna be the baby and like push it until I die. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Sandra, from fahu to fahu. You know what? So this is really based on my experiences. I think Kehau hit it as far as sacrifice. I had realized that there's just some things that I had to sacrifice and forego. But another key thing would be communication. In other words, making sure that those who support you through your college experience, and know what your desires are in pursuing college, is that you keep that open communication with them and kind of let them know. And for me, I had just been like a checklist kind of person. Like I had calendared everything that I needed to do for the week. And I had actually, with my own little family, had always wanted to do weekly check-ins and see like, what is everyone doing, this week. So that communication was really important, letting my husband kind of know what I needed to do. So for me, I mean, as a Tongan, I love the traditions and the culture that we practice, and I love participating in those occasions and those events. But I just know that if I can't make it because I have to study, or I have to write a paper, that I communicate that with my family, and that they're able to represent if I can't go. And so that's, for me, I always thought, well, it's just during this time that, I can't make it to everything as a college student. But once I'm done with my studies, I can totally, give back and totally support, any of my family responsibilities. And so, but yeah, so there, yeah, Cal's right. Being a fahu comes with responsibility, but you can also pu'i and tell others to represent you.
I just want to give a little bit of feedback, but I don't think I'm kind of a, I guess, more traditional student, and I don't know if my advice is worth more than you, Kehau and Latu. You guys' advice is pretty strong, and I don't know if I can beat that one. But I do want to just give a little bit of insight. While I was down at BYU, I felt like I had a lot of things tugging at me. I had rugby at the time, a lot of hard pre-med classes, a couple callings, and then I was also working almost full time and then married, and I was on this dance group called Living Legends. But with all that going on, it was kind of tough because there was hours of practice for dance, hours of practice for rugby, the hours that I had to do for work, at least, 6 hours a day about, or 4 to 6 a day. And then that on top of all the studies I needed to do, it was a tough time. It was a really tough time. But I think like Kehau and Latu were saying, Sandra, is that sometimes you will have to sacrifice in regards to familial stuff, but I would say too that if you have to sacrifice a little bit, you know, to study later, kind of like how Latu said she had to study in the wee hours of the night. I remember I had to do quite a bit of nights like that, and I remember one final, me and my friend were studying until like 6 in the morning because we didn't get to study until like midnight or something. So we were studying for a long time. Then we took like a 4-hour nap and then took the test at 10 a.m. that morning. I don't know. I don't suggest doing that, but but there are some sacrifices that, you know, that you might have to do, but they are worth it in the end. You know, for me, I actually really did enjoy taking the time to go with family and doing those family activities, or, you know, finding time to make that the culture a big emphasis in my life, because that just kept me grounded. You know, I love surrounding myself with those friends and those family members and people that you love, because that's just who we are as Polynesian people. You know, we thrive off of connecting with each other, and those connections really keep us alive and happy and motivated. So in my personal opinion, you know, and it might not work for you, and I say go find your rhythm, because there's not necessarily a balance all the time, but go find your rhythm and what makes it work for you. But for me, I felt like even though I had to study sometimes that study time until later and really study later into the night, or find other times to study, if you can make that rhythm work for you so that you can keep those things that keep you grounded. I know your families are, I love your family, Sandra, but I know like they're a big part of your life, and I know you guys always like spending time together, and if that's what keeps you grounded, if that's what keeps you motivated to keep studying, then make that a priority, keep that a priority for sure. And that will help you so that when you're in those times, in those spaces to study, it'll help you focus and use those times to study effectively. I liked what Kehau said, and as you have all those things, you know, those rhythm, that rhythm basically, you'll be more effective in the times that you allot for each thing, and you'll really just, you know, put away. When I was in rugby, I didn't think about dance. When I was in dance, I didn't think about studies. But when I was in studies, because of all those things going on, if I only had 2 or 3 hours of study, I really studied as hard as I could with that little bit of time that I gave myself. And I think it was because I had all those things around me to keep me grounded. But I really appreciated what Latu and Kehau said, and that's just a little bit of my insight as well.
I can say something just really quickly. And I think you three have kind of hit it on the nail with you guys' insights. I think, and I don't know how applicable this would be for you, Sandra, but I think for me, you know, making sure that, you know, at times you feel all of these burdens and responsibilities and you feel like they fall just on your shoulders alone, but realizing that there are others around you, and whether that be family, friends, professors, mentors, that can help shoulder those burdens and help shoulder those responsibilities. I think having that either in mind or, you know, actually having people like that around you and knowing and I guess, yeah, being surrounded by those types of people allow you to manage these different facets of your life. I guess with a little bit more of ease, because it'll never be easy. And I think a common thread with all of us is that, you know, you will never totally balance anything in your life. You know, I'm just thinking for me personally, like I had to do, I did sports. I was part of a lot of different organizations. You know, obviously with school, and it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and then trying to reiterate those same things to my community and to my family. But, you know, being fortunate to be surrounded by people who help shoulder those burdens, I think made it so that I wasn't like feeling overwhelmed to the point where I couldn't do anything. So I think that is, I guess, just a little insight that I have.
Yeah, I've already talked so much, but I do want to add, if you're interested in ethnic studies, there is a minor and a major, also a PI certificate. I'm just throwing that out there because the reason why I say there's no balance is because there's systems at play that don't allow for a balance. And so the faster you realize like the things that are at play that can't allow you to have a sense of balance isn't your fault. And I think it took me forever to realize that, of like, oh crap, like I need to make money so I can support my family. And so I need to be in school to get a better job, to like make a certain amount. But I mean, that's all because of capitalism. And so like, to know why you're doing certain things, I think it's important and will help you navigate like the sticky situations that you're in. Because Sandra, I think you're like a pro at it, because you were also, I think you played volleyball for Highland, right? And you were the captain. Like being able to lead and like lean on those people and realize that you can't do it all your own, I think is important. Like I think America rhetoric like says that, oh, you have to do it all on your own, like you're an individualist, blah blah blah. Like that's just dumb. Like, and it will burn you out quick with that mentality. And so I think the reason why I loved ethnic studies so much too is because it helped me realize all these systems at play that don't allow me to actually find a balance. And so I just want to add that.
Thank you all. How are you? I have a final thought as we close out. Going along with all the things that you said, and that was a really good question, Sandra, because as you can see, all of us are figuring it out as you go. It's never like something that's tied up perfectly in a bow when you get to a certain age. But one of my favorite analogies that I recently heard, instead of thinking of it as balance, similar to Kehau's, but thinking of it as harmonizing in a song. And this will really, that's a good one for you, Sandra, to be seen. But sometimes there are solo parts and you got to do it all by yourself. And I think so much of graduate programs and higher ed in and of itself is a solo part. And it really sucks in many instances, because the same thing that upholds you with your family also is the distance between you, because they don't understand the process or what's happening with you and why you using so much money and effort and time with very little economic return, right? And Luti can attest to this, and the rest of the graduates can attest to this. It's a huge investment. But I think it's saying, this is my purpose. If you know what your purpose is and you know why you're here and what you're doing, and that may be grounded in what your ancestors, you talked a little bit about our own grandfather and your own grandparents and their own, their dreams that you're carrying on in those traditions, and you just have to hold on to those like for dear life. And I think those that are in community college already or have gone through higher ed for a few courses, just recognize that you continually go back to those, that purpose as you go throughout. So hopefully throughout this week, you kind of are like, okay, I understand. Like, it's more like a calling than it is like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make $1 million off of education. Because honestly, if that were the case, I probably should have quit a long time ago. There's no money in this. No, Luti gonna have money. I mean, we're sustaining our families and things, but if you are going, go to Latu and get some business degree too, if that's the reason. But even there, I know that you still have to find purpose and that harmonization. There's gonna be a point where there's a lot of people in that course, but so much of the time it's you on your own and trying to balance all those different things or harmonize all the different sounds that are happening in your life, because they never turn off, my goodness. And then if you get married and have kids, that's a whole other thing too. So that's it. I want you guys all, thank you for joining us in this session, and for especially the graduate students that are carrying on that torch. We are here, and count us in as part of your community too. And thank you for uplifting us today. We hope that you have gotten as much from this session as we have from you all. And then we will be transitioning to hear from undergraduate students in our next session. Then Kehau.
Mahalo nui loa. Thank you all for joining us and making the time and sharing your ike and mana'o with us. Luti, thank you so much for representing in the medical school. I know that there's not a lot of Pacific Islanders there, and we continue to need Pacific Islanders in every field. And that is a very important one, especially given what you were talking about, how we're disproportionately affected with certain viruses and health disparities. So we definitely need more folks there. So if you're interested in health, please talk to Luti. We'll also have Dr. Nia Aito'oto later this week. And then Latu, Kehau, and Kaimana, you know, some of my, okay, we are being recorded. Some of my favorite students. I said it online, but thank you all. I mean, my students are brilliant. I'm gonna, you know, lift you all up. I mean, you're also the reason why I continue to do what I do, right? It's so like oftentimes we talk about these things as, especially within our cultures, as circular, right? Like they give me the reasons to continue, and I don't have everything figured out either, right? It's been a lot of trial and error, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to learn how to strive for balance. But you find what you're passionate about. You find good people, like everyone has mentioned, and you surround yourself with those good people. And with that, it takes a community, it takes a village. And one of the papers that Latu and Kehau and Mo and Kahale and I have been working on is actually talking about how we have been transformed ourselves by participating in the Bridge program. How the Bridge program itself has actually allowed us the space to reflect on why we're doing what we're doing, and giving us, like, basically empowering us to continue in our studies or continuing in our careers. So thank you all, attendees as well, for giving those gifts back to us as well. But thank you all. Mahalo nui.